What do you call a 100-year-old ant? An antique. Second of the 6 videos on the Perranporth fieldwork, we're going to look at the methods today and everything in that red box.
So, really crucial here, you know the difference between primary and secondary data. Primary is data you collect yourself firsthand. It's not manipulated anyway, you're simply counting or asking questions. You just simply record what's given to you. Primary data because you went out and got it firsthand. Secondary data, information from other sources. It's been collected by someone else, it's been manipulated by someone else. We have to remember here that the issue straight away becomes this concept of bias, and remember also that secondary data can be out of date.
Okay then, so what primary data did you collect in your physical fieldwork at Perranporth? So we'll start with the top one. You collected wave count and wave height data. The count you did on the day, the height you would have worked back out in the classroom using the wave height formula. The reason why you did that is it provides evidence of physical processes. So if you have higher waves in certain places along Perranporth Beach, that will therefore mean there's more force crashing onto the cliffs or sand dunes, and therefore more hydraulic action or more ability to abrade with heavier load within the sea. So therefore there's more chance of undercutting or slumping, or alternatively more chance of flooding, more chance of erosion happening. So the concept there is the reason why you've collected that data is to try and prove the physical processes that are occurring. The final two you might notice are in red, they're in a different colour. The reason for that is they're actually useful bits of data that you're collecting as opposed to the wave count, which we'll see later probably isn't that useful. When we look at the next one, bipolar survey of defences, the bipolar survey looks something like this, just as a little reminder. Apologies, it's very, what's the word for that, where it's unfocused, however you'd want to put it. But it scores between -3 and +3 with the different categories. So, for example, in poor state of repair or in a very good state of repair would be either -3 or +3. So the reason you did that, you had to consider if the defences appeared to be working well or not. Did they show signs of wear, for example? And also to compare the different defences to see if some defences are working more successfully than others. The final bit of data you collected, and you definitely did this, is you did a questionnaire of local residents to consider those people's opinion. The most important or the biggest justification for this is the fact that you had to do this to get data over a longer period of time. You only visited Perranporth for 1 day. What you needed to have done is to have got the information for people over a much longer period of time to therefore be able to conclude, rather than just on the single day, to be able to conclude on the last 20, 30 years of how successful these defences have been. So it's a greater temporal regarding time of evidence. Those are the 3 bits of data that you collected on the day. Let's have a little look at sampling. Right, sampling, really, really important. In terms of all geography field work you'll ever do, to be honest, you will not be able to record every possible bit of data. You will have to sample. A sample is the idea where you take a small section, or as large section as possible really, of the overall area, and then you consider that would be repeated in other areas that you didn't survey. So if you look at the number 1 and number 2 diagram down the bottom, if you do one of those X's, the idea is if you do the X there, it will be repeated in the rest of that blue circle. So, I mean, the reason for that is we simply didn't have enough time and didn't have enough money to do all of the surveys properly. But the big idea is you guys need to be aware that we did sample in both of your field works. A nice little explanation there in the text is, for example, if you're doing a pebble count, I know you didn't do one, but if you were doing a pebble count, there's no way you're going to count every single pebble on Perranporth Beach. You would only survey, let's say 10, and then assume that the results are the same throughout the rest of the beach.
So first things first with sampling, sample size really important. The larger the sample size, the more accurate the data. So if you're looking at number 1 down at the bottom, you've taken one sample site in all of that area. Clearly, investigation number 2 is far more accurate on the basis it has a larger sample size, more sites, therefore it's more accurate. So number 2, more accurate. Big problem here. Number 2 will also be much more expensive and take a lot more time.
Okay, then there are a variety of different methods of sampling that you'll need to know, stratified, systematic and random. On the day in Perranporth, you actually did 2 different types of sampling. Firstly, you did stratified sampling, which is where you choose specific areas on Perranporth Beach which have the types of management that you want to look at. So you did a site at the sea wall, you did a site at the Gabions, you did a site within the sand dunes to show all the different types of management. So you chose specific areas to survey each type of management. That is stratified sampling. You also did systematic sampling, where you chose equally spaced areas of the beach. It might have been 10 paces apart, it might have been 10 metres apart, it might have been 100 metres apart, and you measured how high the waves were across the beach to see if there was any difference in the height. So that's systematic because you are laying down a 10-metre distance between measuring the height of waves. So on your day you did stratified sampling for each of the managements, but you did systematic sampling for the height of the waves. However, there were some other methods of sampling that could and possibly should have been used on the day. Regarding your questionnaire, you didn't have any sampling in place, and what that meant is, of the 34 people asked, generally only 2 age groups have really been asked. It's those over the age of 65 and those under the age of 18, on the grounds that they were the people you were comfortable to speak to. As a result of that, our evidence within the questionnaire data is currently too biased towards those people. What you should have done really is to brought in the systematic sampling, or actually a random sampling, to make sure you remove that bias. So for a systematic sampling, what you would do is every 5th person who walked by, you'd count 1, 2, 3, 4, and then that 5th person, whoever they were, it didn't matter, you would ask that person. And as a result of that, it takes away any bias of you only asking people you feel comfortable to ask. The other way of doing this is random sampling, which is use a random number generator to pick the numbers. If you've got a very clever calculator, it can do this, and you would say, okay, then random number generator between 0 and 10, and it would go and give you the number 7, and therefore you'd wait for 7 people to pass you, and then you'd ask that person. You'd then go back to the calculator, hit the button again, 2, and you'd count 1 and 2, and you'd ask the next person. It completely removes any bias from your questionnaire. You didn't use those sampling methods, but it is certainly a criticism of your physical fieldwork day that you didn't.